Martian Food for Thought. I'm Will, and I'm joined by Matt, Alan, and Peter. We are going to discuss the challenges and potential solutions to one of the greatest issues in colonizing Mars, how to grow food on Mars. But before we go into that, I'm going to quickly talk about why we would want to colonize Mars in the first place. Firstly, the colonization of Mars would accelerate the research we could conduct on the planet exponentially. The red planet could also be a great source of resources, but most importantly, colonizing the red planet would drastically decrease the chances of human extinction. In order to ensure our survival as a species, we would almost certainly need to leave Earth. It would mark the beginning of becoming a multiplanetary species and a new age for humanity. The very first step to building a city on Mars would be creating the agriculture to feed said city. Food helps us build relationships, gives us energy, and is a way to celebrate life. Every day, most of us spend a few of our precious hours preparing and or eating food, which shows how important it is to us. Although it may be possible for future astronauts to bring a lot of their food to Mars freeze-dried, eating fresh-grown food would boost morale for the entire mission. It would also allow for a much more long-term visit to the red planet. If we were able to grow food on Mars, we could potentially change a lot about how food is produced on Earth as well. Firstly, the technology would limit the current necessary transportation of certain foods from specific climates. For example, currently, if you live in Alaska, you are likely getting your pineapples or other tropical fruits from hundreds, if not thousands of miles away. Also, the fruits and vegetables we eat in the winter months could be a lot fresher. The technology required to grow food on the red planet would be extremely useful on Earth due to current situations like this.
The journey to Mars is only the beginning of the obstacles we're about to face on going to the red planet. On top of the seemingly impossible task of getting there, colonizing the red planet is a completely different animal. Mars is an extremely hostile environment, making it difficult for life to establish a footing on the planet. It is characterized by high levels of radiation, lack of water, lack of fertile soil, frigid temperatures, dust storms, different atmospheric pressure, and all of which would make the prospect of farming very difficult. The radiation levels on Mars are on average 24 to 30 rads per year, which is about 40 to 50 times more than the average on Earth. This is because, unlike Earth, Mars has no magnetosphere shielding the surface from harmful radiation. Rays from this radiation come from the sun and would kill any form of life unless protective measures were taken. Radiation will likely kill any of the crops that we would try to grow, making sustainable farming or colonization a very difficult task on the surface. Another essential ingredient in growing food is water and fertile soil. The cold temperatures on Mars would almost certainly freeze the water unless other actions were taken. On top of that, Mars is a barren, dry, and desolate planet. Even if we were to transport water, like I said before, it would freeze over due to the cold temperatures. And additionally, no fertile soil isn't compact or nutrient-rich to support farming. Moreover, the dust storms on Mars are another significant hurdle we would have to overcome. The soil is not really soil. It is loose sediments and causes dust storms to be a common occurrence. Rising plumes of warm air can create large continent-sized dust storms, and these larger storms sometimes combine into global storms, covering the entire planet in atmospheric dust. This is far from ideal and makes smaller crops the future of agriculture on Mars. These include crops such as alfalfa plants, which are expected to be the first crops, and we will be able to grow on the red planet. Overcoming these hurdles will be extremely challenging, but also extremely valuable in the colonization efforts and future agricultural scalability.
So when it comes to agriculture on Mars, there's many opportunities and potential solutions we could have in order to tackle the problem. Some of the solutions include creating a greenhouse environment, hydroponics and aeroponics, implementing a vertical farming system, along with using the already abundant resources on Mars, including the frozen water and the soil of Mars. So as for the greenhouse environment, it is very important that when creating a farm or in order to make it sustainable, we need to create a greenhouse environment like on our Earth already. It protects the plants from Mars's harsh environment, including dust storms and the extremely low temperatures, and it also captures the sunlight as thermal energy and makes use of the limited sunlight in the case of dust storms, which can last for multiple months on Mars, and also helps with heating as well. Though we would also have to supplement plant sunlight with LED lights, which has already been established as a good source of light for plants in order to do photosynthesis. One of the main techniques that would most certainly be used on Mars is hydroponics and aeroponics, which is we have to consider because there are perchlorates in the soil, and taking soil from Earth would be a lot of weight for any space mission to Mars, which we cannot afford above other equipment. So of hydroponics and aeroponics do not need soil. Hydroponics suspends the roots in water, while aeroponics suspends the roots in air and gives nutrients through the mist. And through this system, we would be rather reliant on water, which is an accessible resource on Mars and a resource that we can also bring from Earth. Another technique we can use additionally is vertical farming, which is a way of efficiently using space. Instead of traditional farms where they expand horizontally, which takes up a lot of space and also needs a lot of construction in order to sustain it, especially if we need to build a greenhouse, we'd rather build farm beds in layers in order to establish a fertile farming bed for plants. And not only that, it cuts out the amount of resources we need to build in order to build the greenhouse as well. And also, there's already a lot of available resources on Mars. The soil, we can convert it using bacteria or rinsing it with water. By using bacteria, we can produce nitrogen, which is essential for fertilizer and providing nutrients to plants. And in order to get those perchlorates in the soil, which would be normally toxic to organic matter, out of the soil. There's also the frozen water we can use as well. The plan would be to retrieve that frozen water, process it, and then use it for the plants, and in conjunction with a water recycling system, such that we can also grow the plants and also feed the astronauts as well, and hydrate them. And also, additionally, agriculture does not need to be exactly a primary source of food. It can also be a supplement to MREs and other prepackaged foods, like on the International Space Station already. So we do not need to entirely rely on agriculture when we try to establish our first farms on Mars. And then there's already been plenty of prior research done and a lot of NASA projects, like the Vegetable Production System, also known as VEGgie. It experiments with growing plants in microgravity, and other such NASA projects, such as the Advanced Plantation Habitat and the Biological Research in Canisters. Then there's also already been Mars prototypes in development, such as the prototype lunar greenhouse, which utilizes hydroponics in the greenhouse environment in order to grow these plants.
Before we can talk about the future of Mars, obviously we need to get there first. As mentioned earlier, many problems need to be resolved before we reach Mars. But it's not just the actual trip that needs to be considered. Thus far, the equipment to set up an expedition to Mars is estimated to cost billions of dollars, and that's without considering the food. When looking at the foods that the crew heading to Mars would need, it will only lead to more money being needed. As stated earlier, astronauts could bring freeze-dried food with them, an extremely huge amount, by the way. But overall, the cost of transporting this much freeze-dried food would not be sustainable for a real civilization to start on Mars. Once we create a working farm, it would be a lot cheaper to just bring things like seeds to keep the farms running. Unfortunately, we are extremely behind in the process of making the farms on Mars. The process of making a farm is without a doubt going to be very expensive. One potential problem of farming on Mars, a process of farming on Mars, vertical farming, is estimated to cost millions of dollars based on the equipment needed, among other things, even without considering the potential costs needed to solve any problems regarding the soil and water. So it's very likely that the very first mission regarding agriculture will be one of the most expensive missions to Mars, if not the most expensive. But if this succeeds, then the costs for the later missions will decrease substantially, with the cost now only being for the food for the trip to Mars, along the seeds needed to keep the farm running. It's unlikely that this will happen anytime soon, even within decades. The earliest mission regarding farms will probably not happen until about the year 2100. Here are our sources. Thank you for listening.